When it comes to successful Australian exports, NBA championship winner Andrew Bogut is very, very close to the top. They reckon he's worth about 33 million Australian dollars. That's rich list, top 40 stuff. He has earned over his career around about 13 million American dollars a season, and he could own that other team he plays for, the Sydney Kings, outright. He still might end up doing that. He's got business investments, a business brain, they say, and has a quirky fetish for something that's not at all politically correct. I love him already. And if his stinging social media statements are any guide, he should head for the Parliament of Australia. Let's find out. Andrew Bogut, a great pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I want to start off by asking you about whether you could have ever played for the Bombers, because my sport nut mates said that you were a tennis player, you were a taekwondo, you played football, you played AFL. You actually could have played for Essendon.
Maybe, yeah. I was a big Essendon fan growing up, especially in Melbourne. Footy was the first ball in my hands, really. Whether you liked it or not, that's the way it went in Melbourne, and would have liked to have played footy, but basketball was just something I fell in love with at a young age, and the parents kind of made me make a decision at about 11, 12 years old, and Mum liked it a little better because it wasn't out in the raining cold. Yeah,
I could imagine. Was basketball the last sport on the list that you decided to gravitate to?
I always liked playing it in the backyard, in the driveway, and at school, and then it was the last choice I had, according to my parents. They said, if you change sports again, this is it. You know, it can get pretty expensive driving you around and buying the gear. So if you change sports again, this is it. There's no more going to something else, and thankfully that all worked out well. Now, you can claim to be part of a team that won gold against the United States. Now, we're not talking Olympics, of course, but when you were 18, you played in the Under-19s World Championship. You won gold. You averaged 26.3 points, 17 rebounds. You were the MVP. What do you remember of that time? Was this your plan to make big during the World Championship and then break into the NBA or college? Yeah, the World Juniors was under 19 level, but yeah, coming from Australia, at least back then, we were laughed at going to the basketball tournaments. You know, everyone knew we played hard, but we never really had the skill, the athleticism of some of the other nations, and that was kind of one of the first groups to actually go to the under-19s. We think we can win this thing. And we ended up beating the US in the semi-finals and beat Lithuania by 40 in the final and won gold. And it set a lot of us up for the rest of our careers. And for me, it put me on the NBA draft map. I'd then gone on to the University of Utah at college, where I still wasn't making money, or honed my craft for another 2 years, and then ended up getting drafted #1. So the plan wasn't strategized from an early age. It just naturally kind of, you know, a hard-headed young kid just kept trying to get better and ended up working out into being the #1. But when you became the first Australian to be first picked in the draft, you knew you were on the brink of something really big. How were you handling that? Were you ready for that kind of stardom? Oh, definitely not. I don't think anyone is. I think you've gone from obscurity in Australia, where you get, you know, a couple hundred people to our games in the semi-pro league when I was playing with the AIS, to the University of Utah, which you're not getting paid, and then all of a sudden you're a professional, you're making millions of dollars, which you don't know what to do with at that point. You know, I never had an extra dollar in my pocket in college or as a kid in high school, so that was just mind-blowing. And now I'm in New York City, and there's paparazzi outside the hotel, and you're walking down the bright lights and shaking David Stern's hand. I don't care what you do leading up to that, nothing can prepare you for it. And the journey beyond that gets even tougher, because there's a lot of things, you know, off the court that people don't know are very hard to deal with throughout different stages of an athletic career. And then 2015, I know I'm skipping ahead here, but 2015, you win a championship. And I've gone through some of the photos and the video of the celebrations after all of that. How hectic were they? Pretty good. We were in Cleveland on a Tuesday night, so there's not a whole lot going on in Cleveland on a Tuesday night. I'll just preface it that way. So they booked out a restaurant for us afterwards, but just after the game in the locker room, you always see the champagne. We literally would have sprayed 150, 200 bottles of champagne for a good 30, 40 minutes. And then just celebrated with the teammates. Our families were there. They flew our families up. The club did, which was great. Wow. And basically celebrated till 6, 7 in the morning. Jumped on a charter at about 11. Everyone was asleep, and then had our parade the next day. So a real whirlwind just to win an NBA championship. 1 out of 30 teams do it, and generally there's only a genuine 4 or 5 teams a year that have a chance to do it. To be part of that was very, very special. And of course, earlier on, prior to that, you were being nicknamed Nick from Backstreet Boys. Because I think that was the shape of your hair at the time. I was a junior, yeah. Yeah, I had a blonde-haired undercut with a rat's tail and long fringes. So don't ask me what I was thinking, but Yeah, it all worked out well, but looking back at those photos, it was definitely pretty funny.
All right, some stages during your career, as I mentioned, $13 million in the bank account. Where do you start in working out what to do with that sort of money?
Well, first of all, you give half it to the government, so 50% of it's gone off the top. Still a lot of money, obviously, but the numbers that look nice in the newspapers aren't usually the numbers that end up in the account, but obviously still a plethora of funds to go through. But early in my career, no idea. I had a financial advisor, sitting in a meeting with him half the time and not even understanding what he's saying, really frustrated me, and thankfully it pushed me to go, and I did an online course through RMIT here in Australia while I was over in America, online learning course, and the course was actually called, Finance and Personal Wealth Management. So bang, did that. Didn't do it for a degree or just to get accolades. I did it just so I could learn, and now I manage all my funds and all my investments, my real estate, my stock portfolio, all that myself. So I know kind of where every dollar is, and I think that's very, very important because we hear the horror stories, at least in our league, in the NFL. In some years it was 60-70% of pro athletes go completely broke within 4 years of retirement.
They lose it all.
Within 4 years of retirement. And this isn't guys making a couple $100,000 or $1 million a year. There's guys that hundreds of millions of dollars have lost it within 4 years. And there's a number of reasons why, and that's probably a separate issue I'll talk about in my book one day. But it can be pretty daunting.
The Sydney Kings talk about the fact that you bring not only a great deal of acumen, not only skill, talent, leadership, but you bring a business brain as well. So from that early online course, you've sort of jumped ahead now, and you've got investments in e-gaming. You're trying to change the way coffee is made, as I understand it.
Somewhat, yeah. Look, I was very lucky playing for the Golden State Warriors. Obviously, it's in San Francisco Bay Area. So I'm an avid poker player, and funnily enough, got invited to a poker game in Silicon Valley with some of the biggest VCs in the world, part of their home game. And just going to that game, I got to network with some very powerful business people that are just, 10 steps smarter than I'll ever be. Yeah. And just pick their brain on things, and then all of a sudden, got invites into funds that they were doing, and they gave me heads up on a few things to look for, to invest in, and that's kind of how I started that. And all that is just networking and meeting the right people, and it was just funny that it ended up being through my love of playing poker, of all things.
But here you have your own virtual empire here, and you're building it, and you've got business acumen. But unless you keep fit and, keep reaching for the stars, as it were, and be part of the big games, you can't keep that reputation as high as you needed. Look, I look back on 2010, we might play the tape here. This is when
the elbow,
the elbow went down. An innocuous kind of thing, but have a look at it.
Yep.
It was an overtime game, but he played 41 minutes after missing the 3 games. How about that pass? So Bogut, watch out. Oh, no. Andrew Bogut came crashing down, and that
his arms
was
out.
ugly. Oh, my goodness.
Right.
That is hard to watch.
Yeah, it is.
Whoa.
Seen it many times. Just one of those freak things, a lot of momentum. And
out of 10, pain?
Oh, yeah, 20 out of 10, yeah. I'm pretty, my pain tolerance is pretty high with that. Pat myself on the back, but that was one of the worst ones. So I basically completely dislocated my elbow, and I didn't know at the time. I broke my wrist on both sides and broke my index finger. So I was basically in a cast from my index finger to the top of my shoulder for 6-7 weeks, and that was real hard. I'm right-handed shooter, so it took me about 2 years to get back to a level where I felt comfortable shooting the basketball again, which isn't ideal in the trade that I'm.
You've got to be confident every time you come to the basket.
Your touch goes. It's like throwing a dart, So the touch went, but the proudest thing about that for me was that I bounced back from it, and I continued on, to excel in my career, and then obviously I did an ankle about 2 years later that I was told was career-ending, and bounced back from that and played. I'm still playing today, so. I think the injuries made me tougher and were frustrating, and the frustrating thing about that injury was that was my career year. That was my best year numbers-wise in the NBA, and received multiple awards that year, and was really going, living up to that #1 pick, and then it kind of stalled a little bit, and the rest is history. It ended up getting me traded to the Warriors and won a championship.
The other part of your great acumen is your ability to say things that you believe to be true on social media. You're never afraid to let someone have it if you think they deserve maybe copping some criticism. You say things on Twitter like, You ripped into the Red Cross about their bushfire funds. You were critical of planes arriving from China when the coronavirus started spreading, as most of us did at the same time. You take the mickey out of veganism, and you're never afraid to stir, are you?
I give back as much as I get. I get much more than I give on there, and you know, I like to have fun with it. A lot of times people think I'm sitting there fraying over a tweet and angry and tweeting back, and half the time I'm sitting there with my wife laughing about it. But you know, I'm not always right. I know that.
But you've got insight, Andrew. You've got insight into the way things run.
Definitely. And I've been wrong before, but I like to think I'm always right. But I always take someone's honest opinion, whether they're right or wrong, rather than them just towing the line of what you want to hear. So I've kind of been, you know, raised that way to give an honest answer of what you believe. It might not always be right. And then you deal with it if it's not, and you have a debate like most adults do. You know, someone might sway me on an opinion that I have, but it does cop a lot of flack because I'm not for a lot of the causes that we see most celebrities and sportsmen pushing, because I think a lot of it's very hypocritical, and a lot of people that, you know, push certain causes aren't living that life, and that's where I struggle a little bit. So I just try to kind of stay away from that.
You mean the people who say we should reduce our carbon emissions and fly around in private jets?
Yeah, I've got an issue with that, 100%. I mean, you know, I think things need to be addressed in the world, but I think having people from Hollywood and celebrities kind of, you know, try to ingrain what we should do and think, whatever side of the argument it is probably the wrong people, because I can tell you, I've been part of that life and lived in the States for 15 years, and as soon as those cameras roll off, it's a complete opposite of what they're saying.
Your reaction to the death of Kobe Bryant?
Yeah, tough. I think the most competitive athlete I've played against, an absolute killer out there on the court, but I think his life was kind of reborn once he retired, because he was back to his family and doing the daily things that he always wanted to do that he couldn't do when he was in the NBA. That's the saddest part about it. We all play this game of basketball or footy to set ourselves up for retirement, to be able to do what we want and spend time with our family, and he didn't really have a long opportunity to do that. So it's obviously touched a lot of people in the world, and it just goes to show you, even though people that don't even know him feel like they do, and that just shows how much of a star he was.
When you finished playing basketball, do we see you owning a basketball franchise? Do we see you running businesses? Or will you take a political path? The
political thing, probably not. I've got 2 kids, and I don't think it'd be fair to them, because I'll definitely get in a lot of trouble in politics. I've got no doubt about that.
So you thought about it?
I've been approached numerous times, yeah. I've been approached a lot to get involved in politics when I'm done. And
you do well at it.
Yeah, I mean, but my problem is there's things on both sides that I like and hate. I'm not a one-side guy. People label me as conservative, more to the right, but I don't like pulling myself into one box, because I think once you get to that point, then just because you've signed up on one side of politics, you got to be okay with everything they do and against everything the other side does. I don't think that's the right attitude to have a country that's forward-thinking and moving forward.
And then you're never at home either.
And you're never at home, you know. And it ended up being, you know, I'm a competitive guy, and I get fired up pretty easy, and I'd have to carry some boxing gloves up to Canberra, flying up there every other weekend, I think. So stay away from that. I'll probably take a year off after I'm done playing and just reassess with exactly what I want to do. The beauty of it is I don't have to have a 9 till 5, but I still will manage my business portfolio myself. But the most important thing for me will be to be around my kids. I'd love to be able to drop them off to school and pick them up, and just be around as much as I can, because you know, the way the world's going and schooling is going and whatnot, I think parents are even more important than they once were, and I think everything that starts with kids, as you know, people always complain about schools and childcare and all that. I think it all starts at home. And
I couldn't agree more.
I have the luxury of being able to do that financially, but a lot of people don't. People that work 9 till 7, hard shifts, have to rely on childcare, and all of a sudden you don't know what your kid's learning and who's teaching him what, and it's a vulnerable age, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. You're basically moulding their brain for the rest of their life.